On today's episode, I talk about a very real thing that I think all of us might relate to. This is Rooted with Robert, reminding you to breathe that beautiful, joyous air around you and embrace each moment you find yourself in. Woo! Welcome back to episode 6 of Rooted with Robert. Today is a very, very good one. Are you measuring too many things? Monitoring too closely? Building too much consensus? Intervening too much? And setting too many priorities? Now these 5 things are traits of a micromanager, taking from Inc. or Incorporated in short.com. Micromanager. I'm sure when you hear that, you instantly think of the business world. But how many of those things, when I read them, could have been ambiguous to anything but the business world? Let's be real, people. It's so easy to micromanage ourselves. It's so easy to do it and let it go unnoticed because we know that we're our own boss in the sense that we control what we want to do. You know, obviously in respect to other people, in respect to the law, in respect to societal standards, just so we can all get along and be civil. But in the end, we are the bosses of ourselves. So what's stopping us from being a micromanager? You know, I mean, some people have the trait, some people don't. I get that. But there's that point where I think it's actually going unnoticed. I mean, I micromanage myself at times and I don't even realize it. And then when I do realize it and I mediate, I feel better afterwards. I feel like, oh, wow. Because people don't like to work under a micromanager, like actually in the workforce, right? And it makes you feel a certain way. It makes you feel like you're not getting respect or you're not getting the trust to do your own work and that you're not competent enough. So if you're micromanaging yourself, you're basically destroying your own self-esteem, your own worth because of this type of trait that you may play in certain situations. It could be situational, it could be trait-wise for you, I don't know. Everyone's different, but it's definitely a certain thing. So I'm just using this article. By no means am I, giving credit to this website. I don't even know who this website is. I just picked this article because these 5 traits are something that I agree with, and what I believe constitutes into micromanagement. I'm sure there's more, but they had them all in one spot, which is why I like this article, because I can pull it up right here as I'm talking to you guys and everything is good. So I want to kind of go through these 5 real quick. So measuring too many things. This is basically saying measuring so much that it's not clear what the data really means. It doesn't have to be as literal as measuring data analysis or whatever in a business marketing standpoint. But you're measuring too many things, which I think goes hand in hand with the next one, monitoring too closely. You're monitoring, you're measuring. Did I do something wrong today? Why did I do that wrong? It's kind of paired with criticism, which micromanagers can be seen in that aspect. It's just criticizing yourself so closely. Why you're always trying to check up on yourself. Am I doing what I should be doing? Should I be doing something else? Is this working? And it's called micro for a reason. This is happening on a small level, like all the time. And then the third one, building too much consensus. I kind of like this. You end up discussing things to death, as it says in this article, before making a decision. And how likely is it for this to just contribute to that indecisiveness? If you're micromanaging your life, of course you're not going to reach a decision, because you're not going to come to a decision until you go through all these steps, and even after all those steps, you might not even be satisfied with where you've got to, and you still might not make the decision. Intervening too much is, I think, the biggest thing that I've done in my life that I've found to be more of a detrimental thing to my progression than not. And I'm not going to read off the article specifically on this one, but just going off of how I am about it, it's kind of like letting time play its course, letting life just kind of take over, being patient, and just knowing that where you are right now, you're there for a reason. If you take the perspective because once you take that perspective, it's positive. If you don't believe it and you're trying to believe like, oh, I'm here for a reason, then obviously things are not going to happen, or they're not going to benefit you. But if you take the perspective that where I am right now is for a reason, no matter if I failed a test, if I missed my bus, if I, late to work, I'm here for a reason, because that means with that mindset that there's a lesson and there's information to be gathered in each of those instances to learn from and move forward from. But the whole intervening thing is like you're cutting in. It's almost like, what's a good example? If you're watching like natural animals in the wild kind of play their course, squirrels or birds or whatever, if you're watching them, they're going to go about the day, and you might see the outcome of what they're doing in that moment, whether it be building a nest, whether it be communicating with one another, traveling together, things like that. If you're intervening too much, you keep looking at the birds, you keep trying to go up to the squirrels and talk to them, that's like intervening. If you're doing that, then the process of what they're doing gets disrupted, and that outcome is not going to come. It'll come, but it's not going to come as soon as it could have if you just let it play its course. So that's how I see intervening too much. Setting too many priorities is a big one, because then you feel overwhelmed. I have so many things that need to be done, and the only way to make sure all those things gets done is if you keep checking on it, if you keep monitoring, if you keep intervening, all these other things that happened before. So I'm going to put this article to the side. I'm pretty much done with it. I've had my use. I think that just think about this. Micromanagement. So like I said earlier, there's the big association between micromanaging, micromanager, micromanagement with workforce, bosses, supervisors, business, marketing, whatever the association is. It's usually in that field. But when taking into the perspective of micromanaging your own life, that is where a big step of growth comes in. You're being honest with yourself. Just be honest. Are you micromanaging what you're doing right now? And honestly, you probably won't answer that correctly, because it's hard to tell, because you're living through those means. But when you start becoming more aware of what constitutes a micromanager, I'm not talking about in the business, I'm talking about in general. Micromanaging, managing something on the small scale. That's how I'm thinking about this. A day-to-day, moment-to-moment, checking in, seeing what went wrong, seeing what went right. I think that's the thing. It's too soon. It's just too soon. It really does. The whole intervening thing, I think, is the biggest one. It really does disrupt the whole process of your life. And you're not going to feel fulfilled at the end of it, because you weren't letting those things naturally, organically play out. You kept chiming in. And, it's great at certain points, but when it's consistent and it's all the time and it's throughout the whole day, I think that's where a lot of anxiety comes from as well, and a lot of feeling low self-worth and self-esteem, because you're just pickaxing at yourself. You're constantly chopping, trying to find something, trying to make sure everything is okay, when really everything already is okay. It just depends on the mindset you take to that thing, which is where patience and gratitude comes in, and mindfulness of just, being present in the moment, which I think micromanaging kind of is a lack of mindfulness almost. Because if you were mindful in the moment, I don't think you'd be micromanaging, because you would be able to be present with what really is, kind of, and you would see that the things that you are checking up on with yourself are not necessarily needing to be done in that moment. I wish I could think of some examples right now of, how I might micromanage myself. But I think just the biggest example is just the whole micro aspect of it. Like, it's so hard to pinpoint because there's so many small things that go on in the day. So like by the time I walk from one building for my class to the next class, that 10-minute period, there's a lot of things that could go on. I could walk mindfully, I could walk clear-headed, enjoying the nature, enjoying the day, just observing the animals, the people around me, just being aware of what's going on, and then appreciating the life that entails. I'm walking, I'm fortunate enough to be in school, I'm fortunate enough to have an apartment to stay at, just kind of carrying that feeling of appreciation and gratitude with me as I'm walking to class. That's one way. Or I can come out and let's say I took a test. I think about the test for a little bit. It's like, I don't know how I did about that. You kind of go, that's natural, go through that thought process. And then you kind of just, it is what it is at this point. I put in the work that I put in. So then you move on to the next. There's no need to carry that to the next class with you. Now, what a micromanager might do is they come out of that class with a test. And then they just criticize the hell out of themselves for, I should have got number 6 right, or I should have read that a little slower. If I would have just read that last one, I knew that one might have been right. If I would have just looked at it a little bit longer, I think I could have just came to the conclusion that it wasn't really B, it was really C. And then you kind of go through that, and I'm not saying that specifically, but that type of thinking, it's like, if you're doing that throughout the day, it's like, oh man, that's a lot of brain power. That's a lot of bullshit, honestly. That's a lot of bullshit. You don't need to be putting yourself through all of that nonsense. Yes, it has its place. You want to micromanage, because otherwise you might get, you carried away, or you might just get off a track. But the whole thing with micromanaging is it's happening, the micro part signifies it's happening too often. And by happening too often means it's happening for too much of the little things. So I guess all I wanted to do today is just kind of address this issue of micromanagement. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not saying you're a micromanagement Joe looking at me with the big googly eyes, hoping that he's not a micromanager. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm seriously just pointing out the thing as a thing in itself, because it's one of those things that the more we're aware about, the more we can notice, change, and move forward. And like I said earlier, I've noticed this whole micromanaging thing in myself, and I didn't even realize it was a thing. I really didn't. But once I conceptualized it all in that aspect, in that way, it just made sense. It's like, wow, micromanagement, it's not just the business. It's not just the actual manager, the management of a business. It's literally how you're managing yourself on a day-to-day basis. And I just think it's incredible. Obviously, there might be I don't know, I can't really say, but there might be a positive spin to micromanaging, but I don't think it would be micromanaging. I would think it'd just be managing yourself, and that would just equate to healthy managing yourself, healthy monitoring your actions, self-awareness in those aspects. But when you go to micromanaging, there's a reason why it's called that. There's a reason why it's seen and felt as a negative thing, because it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary for the little things, And it's kind of funny because it's there's the one saying, it's enjoy the little things. But there's also the other thing that's like, don't get caught up by the little things. And I just think it's so funny how there's that fine line between overanalyzing the little things and then savoring the good little things. And obviously it's like there's the negative and positive aspect, which I talked about in the last podcast. But I just think it's incredible. So thank you guys all for tuning in. Just inventory yourself. Do you have aspects of a micromanager? Do you sometimes do it to yourself? And how do you feel after you do that? How do you feel after a period of time where you've identified that you might have been micromanaging your life a little bit? If you want to leave some feedback in the comments or something, let me know. Let me know how it's made you feel in some aspects. If it's made you feel bad, if it's made you feel good, whatever it is, just let me know. So thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate you guys. Micromanager. Take care of it, people. Take care of yourselves. Peace.